Hi guys, today I wanted to just have a bit of a discussion around the new changes that have come into the game recently. The two most contentious things for me right now is the inclusion of neck and neck and on your left. Before the update, they were acceleration skills that essentially were gambling skills. They could proc anywhere on the late race. They could proc exactly when you needed them, and you would fly around the track, or which would typically happen is they would go off in the middle of the final straight, provide absolutely no benefit whatsoever, and not really help anyone win the race. After the update, however, this has now changed. So they now will go off only in the first half in the late race, essentially turning these skills into gambling, into essentially a very good acceleration outside of uniques that are currently available to us in the game. Right now, it's difficult to say whether they are mainstays or not, particularly neck and neck. We'll cover them individually, but for right now, let's focus on what they both bring to the table. So neck and neck and on your left are both accelerations for pace chaser and late surges respectively. And what that does is it essentially provides them with a new way to gain an acceleration outside of, like I said earlier, a unique such as Marizensky, Major Orion, Major Odoba, which everyone would have been using in the game right now. This poses an interesting problem, and that is what that looks like when we move into Grand Life, particularly for pace chasers. So let's focus on neck and neck. Neck and neck is available on one card and one card only, and that card is Daiwa Scarlet Power. The major issue is that when we move into Grand Live, this deck will consist of 2 to 3 speed, depending on the Uma. We'll say for the sake of this argument that the deck will be 2 speed, light hello, 2 wit, and a flex card. That flex card potentially could be Daiwa Scarlet. There is a bit of a problem though, and that is, outside of sparks, where am I getting my stamina from? If the focus on Grand Live is to click wit and click speed, and on the odd bad turn I do the date with like hello, where do I have time to click power or stamina? Daiwa Scarlet is a very good card, don't get me wrong. I very much like the card, and she has a stamina bonus. She, in essence, will move the needle for only a handful of Umamusume, and that is where the conundrum lies. If we look at the next champions meeting, which is the 2000 Dirt, there is an argument to be made that Christmas Ogre Cap has now gotten more scary and potentially more dominant than ever before. Christmas Ogre Cap, as of this moment, requires little to no effort to get her unique off. She does have to pay the free recovery tax. Those would typically be hydrate or preferred position if you can get it. She has hydrate built in, corner recovery which she needs to get, and with the changes to Breath of Fresh Air, straightaway recovery is now on the table, with the triggers also being, of course, 777 and U equals MA squared from Agnes Tachyon. With neck and neck, she now has access to a 0.4 acceleration, as well as her own unique, as well as Nimble Nap. In essence, she will be near enough unstoppable. especially if she's built very well. Of course, this is not even mentioning the addition of Summer Gold Ship with the escapades of 564, which allows a Dominator to go off with Keen Eye, or a Mystifying Murmur to go off irrespective of position. Whatever the case may be, the issue that we find ourselves in for this Champions meeting in particular is when we consider Christmas Ogre Cap going forward, it's very difficult to not think of how powerful she can actually get. In terms of other Umas, it really does depend on what their growths are, and if they can fit in a card that doesn't require Super Creep. Because if we're hitting wit and we're hitting speed, it's very difficult to justify including Daiwa Scarlet in every deck going forward for Pace Chasers. Is it a strong skill? Absolutely. Is it worth the points? Of course. Would it be worth putting hints of head on to make the skill cheaper? Absolutely. But it really does pose a question for the rest of the cast, because Pace Chasers have predominantly been in a state of limbo, really. The only time that they truly shine is in sprint races. Only a handful of Umas can run sprint unless you force them in there, but that's part of the magic of the game, I guess. And it can be a bit tricky to find a way to shoehorn this into a deck. And we still can get access to head on, only a 0.2, but does it really compete with Christmas Ogre Cap, who could potentially have access to neck and neck? I'm not so sure. The more I think about it, the more it truly does become a bit of an issue. Now, that's not to say that going down further on down the line that it won't be used on other tracks. Of course, we still have the sprints, miles. We also have longs, which, funny enough, there is a long in Grand Live that we do have towards the end of it. But I don't think Grand Live is where we'll be seeing a lot of neck and neck. Head on, more than likely, yes. Neck and neck, not so much. Unless you're Christmas Ogre Cap. Or you've got an Uma with an inbuilt recovery and you can get away with it. That's really the only way in which I can see this working. But that's really where we stand in terms of neck and neck. On your left is a completely different story though. On your left is in a unique position because once again it's only found on one card, and that card is Nice Nature. Now, Nice Nature, for all intensive purposes, is a card that should not really be used in Grand Live, purely because if we think about before the update, it would have essentially just provided me a skill that essentially did nothing. In terms of its stat output, it's lower than Fine Motion, and with a 35 specialty rate, it probably would have been better to run another wit card that would have provided me more rainbows more consistently. The issue with Nice Nature now is that because she provides on your left, it is pretty much mandatory now on late surges, unless of course they have that built into their kit innately. Let's consider for a moment that this same Christmas Ogre Cap that is a monster as a pace chaser now has access to on your left instead. we don't have to worry about a power card. We still click speed and wit, and we can safely take a stamina card if we need it, or any other card to help supplement the deck. This truly does become almost frightening. Let's consider she has, on your left, her own unique, Nimble Nav, and Major Orion or Major Odoba. We're now looking at a 0.4, a 0.2, another 0.2, another 0.2. So we're getting to the point where she essentially starts teleporting, and I cannot see anyone coming close to that level of acceleration. Regardless of whether there's diminishing returns or not, the fact that she has access to this is very potent and very scary. We went from run her pace to get behind the front runner to enable no stopping me. Yes, we had to take Yikin Obijin, which didn't really do much in terms of wit output, to now having access to a consistent acceleration at the start of the late race on top of her own unique proccing. And that's even before we even start considering uniques such as Doba and Ryan. Even if we take Christmas Ogre Cap out of the equation, let's look at shorter tracks like the current sprint that we have, a mile potentially coming up. On your left essentially acts as just a better acceleration than even Major Orion, and that's because she doesn't need to gamble for 6th. On your left, with the changes, you can now go up. You can now proc it, I believe it's 4th place or lower, so anywhere between 9th and 4th, which means if she pushes up the challenge pace chasers and she finds herself in 4th, that Uma will fly. Is it a problem for Ogre Cap Christmas if everyone is running a Christmas Ogre Cap to enable it regardless of position? Maybe not. But it does pose a unique conundrum later on down the line, and that's because of the inclusion of other skills that will enable runners or late surgers in shorter races, or even the longer races. For example, let's say we run along. Typically, late surgers struggle to find an acceleration, especially in long tracks. The most consistent one that we have access to right now are straightaway spurts for end closers and Kitters and Blacks unique for front runners. With the skill changes, that now moves slightly in late surgers' favour. Late surgers will now have access to a skill in the Japanese version called Lose Yourself. Lose Yourself is found on Simberly Chris S Stamina. This is their essential winning acceleration skill for long races. Let's say I want to run Tannhauser, who has an inbuilt recovery, has access to Lose Yourself, and will now have access to, on your left, we're now looking at a potential late surger that would dominate longs. Now I could be completely wrong, and especially for the long where it is only Lose Yourself for late surgers, and on your left doesn't go off the same time as Straightaway Spur or Kitters and Blacks unique, and all of this could just go away. But we haven't gotten there yet, and until we get there, we don't know the ramifications of it. There are some other skills as well that have essentially changed, like I mentioned earlier, Breath of Fresh Air. So let's talk about Breath of Fresh Air or Straightaway Recovery, which also poses an interesting question for certain Umas in the game. So Breath of Fresh Air has changed to be more consistent. instead of it going off anywhere on the straight in any part of the race, and that includes the late race, it now goes off in the mid race on a straight. So that being said, it also means that Citizen Black can provide a consistent heal for both of her hints for both corner and straightaway recovery. And it also means that the acupuncturist now has an interesting dilemma that poses to players. So normally when you get the acupuncturist event, you get the option to, ideally you would pick between the charming or the winning chakra. Charming chakra obviously gives you charming, helps us in the long run, but the winning chakra gives us, and just slaps this on to the Uma if you are successful, corner and straightaway recovery. This now means that it is in our best interest to always go for the winning chakra, purely just to get those two skills on the Uma that we're training, unless of course it's a track that doesn't require a recovery skill. This helps of course Christmas Ogre Cap, but because of that, it now puts a lot of value onto cards that have Breath of Fresh Air. Right now, players who have been playing the game long enough would have had access to Toast and Jordan's speed, and if you were lucky enough to get enough copies of it, Vodka Power. They both provide Breath of Fresh Air, which has obviously now seen its value increase exponentially. Another Uma that has seen a great benefit from this as well, which I haven't really seen much of discussion of revolving around her, is Mayano Top Gun. Now, Mayano Top Gun has now essentially had her entire kit work for herself. She has innately Breath of Fresh Air and also No Stopping Me, essentially getting a recovery for a medium or long race and an acceleration for the medium and long race. And that's not even counting a secret event that allows her to get Slick Surge, Head On or Straightaway Spurt. In essence, this allows Mayano to potentially be one of the most scariest Ubers in the game, outside of Christmas Ogre Cap when she is on a favourable track. Outside of that, Mayano is now looking at quite a nice power bump. I don't think this will affect any particular tier list, but it is something to keep an eye on. With the current skill changes, it also opens a particular question regarding the state of frontrunners. I've mentioned neck and neck and on your left fairly extensively, and there is a threat that frontrunners will not be as dominant going forward, purely because of the way that these two skills interact with the track. So let's take, for example, where frontrunners actually are right now. Frontrunners have just gotten Marizensky, a very powerful speed card that a lot of people would have pulled for, potentially MLB'd, potentially gotten 1 LB, whatever the case is, they have access to the card, we have access to it. And now it seems like this potentially could be one of the first nails in the coffin for fronts, because there will be a time when they get relegated to League of Heroes, and that time was when these particular changes to the skills were done in JP. With the changes to on your left and head on, or sorry, neck and neck, it now means that there is a real threat of front runners not being able or keep hold of the lead to the finish. Front runners right now only really get access to angling and scheming. They don't really have any exclusive acceleration skills outside of that. They do have second wind, but it's no different from Essence of Racing Stamina, or again, whatever that's been translated to on a global. There is a legitimate concern that front runners now could potentially just be relegated to nimble nav proppers. I want my pace chaser to be right behind the fronts. I want my late surgers to be right behind the pace. Everyone procs nimble nav on No Stopping Me. And we've seen it before. If a front runner cannot get a significant lead early on, and even in some cases, even if they do, there's an argument to be made that they are more likely to get run down now than ever before. We'll see how this plays out over the course of Grand Live and of course moving into Grandmaster, but I truly believe that we are looking at the dawn of late surges. Once we move into Grandmaster, late surges get access to Neo Universe and Sakura Laurel, which will propel them to exponential levels on mediums and long races. There is also the Daichi Ruby card that will be coming out shortly, which will help backliners with sprint and mile races. So are we truly seeing the death of fronts? Is this the end of their dominance in Champions Meeting? Are we now just preparing them for League of Heroes? We'll have to find out. I, for one, believe that we are. I think there's too many skills and new skills that are in the game currently and that will be in the game following Grand Live. And I believe that fronts at this point, you're essentially just either briefing yourself or you are running a front runner with a specific strategy in mind to catapult either a pace or a late, because I can't see how front runner would just win with what is currently available in the game. I may be wrong, but I don't see where that would come. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I hope you enjoyed the races. This will be the last one, so do let me know if you've been watching how many wins I actually got from this montage, and I'll see you in the next one.